You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Justice is Served. I'm your host, Mari Fagel. I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts, Loni Coombs and Rahwa Ghebre-Ab. Thank you so much for joining me.
Great to be here.
And now this is the show where we give you all of the latest in legal news. We had a special guest caller that was supposed to call in today, Mark Geragos, the famed criminal defense attorney who has represented every celebrity in the book. When a celebrity gets in trouble, he's the one you want to call. He actually had to jump on an earlier flight back from the back east, so unfortunately he can't join us on the phone today. But I do want to continue talking about two major cases of his that are in the news this week. The first one is the ever-present on this show, Chris Brown. And the second one is an interesting lawsuit stemming from the death of Paul Walker in that fiery car crash in the Porsche. So first I'm going to talk about Chris Brown. Now, Chris Brown has been on this show a lot, as I have said. We've been talking about him a lot on this show. He admitted to a probation violation in D.C. Now, remember, this is an incident where allegedly someone photobombed a picture of his when he was at a hotel in D.C. and he decided to clock the guy. He decided to beat him up. So Chris Brown admitted to the probation violation, but Mark Geragos, his attorney, says that doesn't mean it's a confession in the criminal case that he is facing in D.C. That just means that he's admitted to the probation violation, which is a lower standard of proof. It is more likely than not that he violated probation, but that doesn't mean that it's beyond a reasonable doubt that he beat up this guy in D.C. So there's two different standards going on. But it was an interesting maneuver to me for him to admit to the probation violation. The consequences of that was he was sentenced to another 131 days in jail. He very well could get out soon because of jail overcrowding and because of time already spent in jail. But Loni, as a prosecutor, first I want to ask you, why do you think Mark Geragos, and this is the question we were going to ask Mark on the phone, and if we get him, we will ask him, why do you think that Mark Geragos decided to have Chris Brown admit to this probation violation instead of fighting it?
Okay, so a lot of what attorneys do, and the good attorneys, is they strategize how to handle cases when you have more than one case. Remember, Chris Brown had the case here in L.A. That's the assault against Rihanna, and then he's got this new case in Washington, D.C. So they're going to affect each other because he was on probation in L.A. So when he admitted the probation violation, that was on his L.A. case. Remember how he flew back on Con Air to Washington, D.C., and he was supposed to go to trial there. His bodyguard had already been tried for the assault case, and he was convicted. Supposedly there's this independent witness that the judge said, I totally believe, and he saw what happened. And so they found that the bodyguard was convicted. Now the bodyguard, the prosecution was planning on having him testify against Chris Brown, but at the last minute, the immunity deal that they were going to give him fell apart, which makes sense because he'd already been convicted, so he has no reason to want to testify at that point for the prosecution. So that case, the trial, fell apart. Well, it hasn't fallen apart, but it got put on hold. And meanwhile, Mark Geragos said, well, I'm going to get Chris back into L.A., admit the probation violation so he can finish this jail time, whatever the judge wants to do in LA, and get that done with. So now he doesn't have these two cases pending. My guess would be, and this is pure speculation, but usually when you have cases like that, the attorneys want to figure out how to package them together. Now, because they're in two different states, they can't really package them together like you could if they were both in LA. However, they want to work out, okay, this is what's happening in this case. Judge here, what do you want to do since he's already going to get this much time in LA? So what he might be thinking is, okay, he's going to go back to LA. He's going to get a jail time sentence. Maybe that will be enough for the case in Washington, D.C., or maybe the Washington, D.C. case is falling apart and he's assuming, okay, let's get the LA case out of the way. Let's get him out of custody. Let's get him back in his life and being a good guy so that the D.C. Courts can see that, and maybe they'll be able to negotiate a plea in the D.C. case, or maybe it'll just fall apart if they don't have this bodyguard witness that the prosecution was planning on.
But is the D.C. case truly falling apart if he at least admitted to this probation violation? Because I understand it doesn't amount to a confession of him saying, I beat this guy, but it admits to a confession that there's enough in that police report for him to have admitted that, yes, it is more likely than not that I violated probation. So, Rahwa, how do you think that one admission will affect this case in D.C. if it does move forward? Don't you think that is at least some evidence? And even if the bodyguard doesn't testify, don't you think the fact that the bodyguard himself was convicted is at least some evidence that could help get him convicted?
I think that admission of a probation violation is not necessarily, going to have much of an effect on the D.C. case. I mean, Mark Geragos has been doing this a long time. He knows exactly what he's doing, and I'm pretty sure that he took a gamble and that this gamble will pay off. It's highly unlikely, in my opinion. But of course, I'm not a criminal attorney and don't have much of a criminal background. I'm more of a civil attorney. So at this point, it's difficult to say, and we'll see how it turns out.
And and let me clarify. When I say that it's falling apart, it's not falling apart that it's going to go away. I don't think it's going to go away. I think something will happen. And remember, there's that independent witness that they can still use against Chris Brown that seemed to be so effective against the bodyguard. So by falling apart, I mean they weren't able to proceed when it was set for trial. I mean, they were in court ready to go, and the prosecution said, hey, we just lost this witness we were planning on. We need time to regroup. And so I could see some type of deal being worked out in that if the prosecution doesn't feel, like they want to go back to trial. But I do think that there's, something there, and with this independent witness that they can use against Chris, like they used against the bodyguard, I think they feel like they can get something out of the case. But the probation violation, it's a lower standard of proof, so it doesn't equate to a confession, up to beyond a reasonable doubt. And also, Mark was very clear in saying, Chris didn't admit anything. I, as his attorney, stood up and said, look, there's enough there. We're just going to admit a probation violation because they could force the DA here to put on the evidence, which would mean putting on the evidence from the D.C. case to prove to a judge there's a probation violation. And Mark said, no, we don't want to go through all that. Let's just say that there's a lower, because of the lower, it's a very low standard of proof for a probation violation to prove that. So we'll just go ahead and admit that, and let's just deal with that and move on with the LA case.
Yeah. Chris Brown doesn't need any more bad press than he's already gotten. Right. So having a prosecutor here put on evidence of the probation violation is just even more bad publicity for someone who's already so disliked. That's why I want to ask you both. Chris Brown, like I said, very well could get out of jail very soon because of jail overcrowding, because of credit for time served. So let's say he gets out of jail next week. He's served time in jail. He's been in rehab. He likely has, certain bipolar disorder. That was one that was mentioned, different disorders. How do you think the public will respond to him when he's back in the public eye?
I have to say, Chris Brown has gotten it a lot worse than many celebrities I've seen who've done many of the things or equal to the things that he's done. Not to say that he hasn't deserved some of the criticism, but for some reason, I don't know if it's because he's young, I don't know if his race has anything to do with it necessarily, but he has gotten a lot of blowback, and the public has not been very forgiving with him. And I think that has been an issue for him. I mean, he came onto the scene at a very young age, and just a few short years later, he was charged with the beating of his then girlfriend, pop star Rihanna. And since then, I mean, it has just been one thing after another. And I think Mark Geragos, his attorney, has done an amazing job of doing what he can with the facts and using this 24-hour news cycle and social media to his advantage. He's always speaking on behalf of Chris, you know, in terms of his 700 hours of community service, how that's made him a better man, how this process has made him reflect, and he continues to speak on Chris's growth. It would be my hope that the public would be a bit more forgiving, but for many, it appears that he's been given many chances, and it remains to be seen.
Well, I think people are remembering those photographs of Rihanna. I mean, that was a very serious case. And then he got put
with
on
a beloved star.
Yes, and the photographs were right there. I mean, it wasn't just hearing about it. You saw how violent that attack was. And then when he got on probation, which is, I will tell you right now, with those types of injuries, extremely rare to get probation out of that. He's given community service, which the first time through they found was the proof was fraudulent. So he didn't even really do it. So and then he continues to have these little scuffles or whatever you want to call it, bad behavior along the way, that he just doesn't seem like he wants to follow the rules. And then we've had those little flare-ups of the temper. And then, you know, he can't, when he's in rehab, he flames out at his mother in rehab, and, you know, and then ends up getting in trouble and thrown in jail. The one reason I would say that if he's going to have a turnaround, this is the chance, and I am sure that Mark is drilling this into his head. He has now gone to rehab, and he's now gone to jail.
Yeah.
Those are very serious consequences for anyone. And if there's any moment in time in his life where he can legitimately stand up and say, I am a changed man, now watch my actions go forward, I'm going to show you that, it's right now. Because he's really gone through it. So I
wish you had given Lindsay Lohan the same pep talk.
I know, and that's the problem, is some people don't do it, you know, but if he wants the public to say, okay, I'm going to give you a second chance, it's after he's actually gone through what he's gone through, the rehab and the jail. Now you're going to get your second chance. If you blow it after this, you're going to become Lindsay Lohan, where no one ever, you know, really gives you the credibility anymore.
And Lindsay Lohan is someone we will be talking about later on in this show. Now, talking about second big case of Mark Geragos's is the lawsuit against Porsche. So Paul Walker and Roger Rodas, he was the man who was in the car with Paul Walker when they both died in the fall. You know, the LA County Sheriff's Department found at the time that unsafe speeds was the cause of the crash and their deaths. They found that the car was driving up to 94 miles per hour. So I thought, you know, it's done. It's a case closed. It's a very, very, very tragic case. Very sad. But that's it. They were speeding. You know, these are two people who love to race cars, who both, you know, Paul had done it in movies. Roger was a professional car racer. They owned a team or a store regarding that had something to do with racing cars, and so it wasn't that surprising to me to have found that they were speeding at 94 miles per hour. But now Mark Geragos is representing the widow of Roger Rodas, claiming the car was actually only driving 55 miles per hour, and that the reason for the crash, and the reason more specifically for why they both died, was the lack of certain safety features in the car, that the car was defective. So he is filing a lawsuit against Porsche. And it's interesting to me how this will play out. Rahwa, I want to ask you, he is contesting what was found by the LA County Sheriffs as the cause of the crash. You know, Mark Geragos has said that he will have experts come on to testify that that wasn't true, that they weren't speeding, and that that report was actually biased. But what do you think about that?
I think that whenever a death is involved in some type of like a personal injury matter, that the family and friends of the ones who were lost want to get answers, and not necessarily are always convinced by a greater administrative investigation. And so I think that Roger Rodas's wife wanted to, you know, find out further, okay, wait, what's going on here? Was this really the cause? Wanted to really get the answers. And in the news reports that I've seen to date, Mark Geragos has hired a ton of experts already to make his case in order to see if there was one and bring something forward. And And I think we'll just have to see how this is going to play out. But I don't think Mark would have brought this case had he not had his own group of experts that could speak as to this issue.
And now, Loni, I want to ask you about what you think Porsche will say in response. What Mark Geragos is claiming is that the vehicle lacked a proper crash cage and safety features in the gas tank that could have saved both of their lives. So how will Porsche respond to this claim?
Well, this is interesting because when this crash first occurred, you heard in the media a lot of chatter about how this car was known to be dangerous and how, there'd been other types of crashes like this. So and I don't know the stats, if there's a track history of this type of thing. Of course, Porsche is going to come out and say, no, the car is safe, but it's meant to be a high-powered race car. I mean, it's supposed to go hundreds of miles per hour. That's what it's made to do, and that you have to know how to, drive a car like that, and that they have all the safety features that it needs to have, but still there's always that inherent risk of driving that quickly. Now, what's interesting, and I think what Mark Geragos is going to hang his hat on in trial, is this. He's already put together his own team of experts, which is what he's got to do before he even files this case, because if you don't know that you already have experts who are going to say the opposite of what the police investigation said, then you don't even file the case. You don't even go to trial. But he has a lot of experts that he say are very credible. What he's going to point to is the police investigation. When they did their investigation, and believe me, police officers, that they don't have the types of resources that maybe an attorney like Mark Geragos has. So they turn to whatever experts they can get. They used Porsche experts. They went to the actual company themselves, Porsche, and Porsche was involved in the investigation. They gave their own input. That gives Mark the perfect position of saying, well, of course they came up with that conclusion because Porsche doesn't want any liability looking at them. They want to blame it all on the speed of the driver and make it the driver's fault. And so I think that a jury's going to look at that and say, well, that's inherently suspicious, and the police should have used someone else besides the maker of the car because they have a bias going right into it, that they're not going to want to find blame on themselves. They're going to want to be able to find a high speed by the driver. So, that's, I think, what Mark's going to be arguing to the jury, and it may be very effective, and it may be enough to negotiate some type of high, number disposition out of the case without it going to trial, because Porsche is not going to want the publicity that would come from this trial because so many people love Paul Walker. They're going to be following this case.
Well, it will also be a case that we will be following as it proceeds.
All right, so we're going to turn to Aaron Hernandez. Now, it's interesting that Aaron Hernandez, he was in the news. He's the NFL star who was charged with murder. And now all of a sudden the headlines say he's indicted for 2 more charges of murder. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I already thought it was 1 charge of murder, but this is actually a separate case. So the first case we know about was when he went out with a group of his friends, the allegations go, and there was one person he got mad at, who was a friend of his, who was also a football player, not to the, stature of Aaron Hernandez, and that they went into this car, and that in a rental car that Aaron had rented, that they drove to this sort of empty warehouse area, and that Aaron shot him, and then they left him for dead. And Aaron was arrested on that. The investigation proceeded, and they ended up charging him with first-degree murder, and also his girlfriend, fiance, and sister for trying to help him hide what went on, as far as hiding the gun and lying about things during the investigation to the police. Now, the police have gone back to a case that happened a couple of years before that, where 2 men were killed in essentially a drive-by shooting outside a nightclub. And there had been talk and suspicion that Aaron Hernandez had been involved at that point. So the police have taken this case to the grand jury, and the grand jury has now issued an indictment. And essentially the prosecution case is that Aaron was in a nightclub with some friends of his, that they just happened to meet these 2 guys, and there was some type of interaction, but there's really no proof that they knew each other ahead of time, that these 2 men, the victims, got in their car and they left. They really had no idea that Aaron Hernandez got into a car and was following them. And the allegations go that at one point they stopped and Aaron Hernandez's car pulled up next to him. And the prosecution is alleging Aaron Hernandez pulled out a gun, fired into the car, ended up killing the 2 victims, hitting a 3rd passenger, and then 2 more passengers ran out and escaped and were not hit. So now he's got these 2 cases of murder charges, extremely serious cases. And first of all, Mari, I'd like to know, why do you think that they did not investigate this case back when it happened, the first case? Mind you, after this occurred, about 2 weeks later, Aaron Hernandez went ahead and signed a $40 million deal, with the football team. So why do you think at that time that the police didn't give it the time and attention that they're giving it now?
Not even that the police didn't give it the time and attention, but the passengers who were in the car who survived, maybe they were too afraid to come forward at the time and say something.
Yeah.
But now that Aaron Hernandez is locked away in prison, they felt safe enough to come forward.
That's a very good point. Rahwa, what do you think about now that he's got both of these cases pending? How do you think that he and his attorneys will proceed with all of this?
I have no idea. I have no idea. This looks so bad.
Yeah.
This is so bad. So in addition to this 2013 shooting of the friend, the semi-professional football player, and now these 2 murder charges. We also have the press. The press is contended with these additional charges of a jailhouse fight that we covered in this show a few weeks back. In addition to that, he's been charged with 3 counts of armed assault with intent to murder and assault and battery with a deadly weapon, based upon the other people that were in the car with those 2. I think their names are Daniel Abro and Safira Furtado. The 2. I think there were 2 or 3 other people in the car, and there were assault charges brought against Aaron based upon him shooting at them as well. And so I do not know how they are going to proceed with all this bad press. It continues to go, and the actual facts, of course, it continues to get worse for him. I don't know how he's going to get an impartial jury. I don't know how this is going to move forward. What I do know is that this looks really bad.
Yeah. Well, he has said that they're going to do the trials separately. So we'll see what happens with all of that. And hopefully, I mean, I don't know if there's any other investigations pending out there that, he
or any other people he's murdered.
That's what I'm saying. Any other, I mean, the bodies are stacking. I mean, 3 dead bodies now attributed to Aaron Hernandez. That is shocking. And even
3 dead bodies within a period of a year.
Yes.
So if he could kill 3 people in 1 year.
Yeah, and the sister of one of the victims was asked about this, and she said, I'm shocked. I mean, it's actually frightening to think that here was this man who was in the media, in the spotlight, living this glamorous life, and actually a role model for a lot of people. And to know that this is what was going on, and that he was living with this in his psyche and still seemed to be able to perform.
Well, because he thought he could get away with it, because he did get away with it for so long.
Right. Yeah. So
but now it's caught up.
Very, very frightening. All right. Next case, Justin Bieber. All the media alerts went out yesterday. Justin Bieber accused of attempted robbery. My goodness.
I literally got like a red flashing breaking news thing on CNN.com.
I know. It should say Bieber, bad behavior, once again. But what we're hearing now is it may not be quite as serious as the headline, alleges it to be. Apparently, what the young woman who is the alleged victim in this case is saying to certain outlets is that she was at a batting cage in Sherman Oaks on Monday night, and at the same time that Justin Bieber was there with a group of his friends and some other people, and that they kind of got into an altercation. And so she, along with some other people, that were sitting there watching, she pulled out her cell phone to take pictures or video, and that Justin happened to see her and said, I want to see your phone. I'm going to delete whatever's on there. And she said no and put it in her purse, and that he reached and tried to grab the phone. And so of course, she didn't go to the police right then. She waited until Tuesday and made a report, and then the police were taking her statement Tuesday night. And at that point, that's all we know. We don't know if charges are actually going to be filed. Rahwa, do you think that where there's smoke, there's fire? Do you think that this really rises to the level of an attempted robbery charge? Do you think he's going to get the Bieber treatment? What do you think is going to happen?
Technically, it could rise to a robbery charge, because technically it could be attempted robbery. Based on the facts known to date, it seems like something pretty minor. But of course, I wasn't there. None of us were. We don't know exactly what happened. In fact, one of the employees, alleged employees of the batting cage, appeared on TMZ Live yesterday and made a statement that was quite to the contrary, saying something to the effect of, well, Justin was actually just there hanging out, and a whole bunch of people were taking pictures, and the flash was really getting to him, and his security asked the woman to stop taking photos. She ignored it. She was kind of becoming really aggressive, and that security camera footage may not catch it because they were so far away. So, okay, is this a
Conveniently.
Is this a planted story? Is this something to kind of do damage control? But as it stands, but Justin Bieber has gotten so much bad press lately that it is pretty easy to believe that he did something like this, even though he has several bodyguards who could have easily diffused the situation if it occurred as stated. And
let the bodyguards do the dirty work for you, though.
What are they gonna
Why did
learn?
Justin Bieber himself go over and grab it? He's such a team of enablers and entourage around him. Let those people take the fall. Let those people grab the phone. Don't do it yourself.
Well, I think that's the level of maturity. You know, he always likes to jump in. He's a kid. He's still a kid. Now, even if the flash bulbs were going off in his face like that, Mari, do you think that he has any right to try and he or his bodyguards to stop the people from taking photographs of him?
Here's the thing. Sometimes I do have sympathy for Justin Bieber because, like you said, he is a young kid. He tweeted out this week after this, attempted robbery that something along the lines of just, how difficult it was to, always be in the public eye. And it must be difficult that everywhere you go, there's people taking photos, people wanting you to fail, watching for you to make a mistake so that they can catch it. And in this 24-hour news cycle and with TMZ and everything, that mistake will, even a fight within an elevator in a hotel, that has been leaked. So, I feel bad for celebrities in the sense that they must always watch their move every single second of the day, and they can never, ever make a mistake, because if they do, people will pounce on it. And he's a young kid. He doesn't know how to handle himself in those situations. And while someone who may be more older and more mature, like a Beyonce, may just stand there while something crazy is going on and just look like the epitome of calm, he's a young kid and he made a mistake.
I do wonder if people are really taking advantage of these types of situations and these repeat offenders, such as Justin Bieber, Chris Brown, and looking for a quick payout. I think that's where sometimes my sympathy lies. I don't know if that's going to happen in this case or not, but I do wonder.
I do think that very well could be the case, but it only is after the behavior. There's a pattern there. Where, that they set themselves up for then the people that might want to just set them up and cash in.
Absolutely. Well, here we are again, another week talking about Donald Sterling. The Clippers owner has been rejected by several prestigious Los Angeles and San Francisco law firms, at least 8, in his quest to sue the NBA as they are attempting to take his ownership away from him. And we are being told by several news outlets that it's because they think he is toxic and would upset their existing clients, particularly clients that have, both African-American clients and corporate clients that are extremely sensitive to this present controversy. I think just yesterday, outlets were reporting that he finally did obtain representation in getting Maxwell Fletcher, who's a well-known antitrust attorney, to represent him. And allegedly, this attorney sent out a letter to the NBA saying, you know what, I'm not paying this $2.5 million fine that has been levied upon me by the NBA, and I will fight you to the death. Loni, what do you think about how Donald Sterling is going to push this fight forward? We already hear he's litigious. How do you see this going?
Well, this is what I've been anticipating the whole time. And what's so funny to me is that everybody kept telling me from the sports world, oh, no, the NBA Constitution will rule everything, because once you sign into it as an owner, it's like a country club. You don't get in unless you agree to these rules, and once you're in, you have to abide by these rules. I get that. And I even started to say, okay, I guess you're right, because this Constitution is like this mysterious document. Nobody ever really gets to see it, and we're being told piecemeal what is actually in that document. One thing, which is supposedly a clause that says this is totally binding, it acts like an arbitration decision, and no court, outside court, can step on this. So essentially a judge won't come in and try and change it. However, I keep saying that there's laws out here, and especially the antitrust laws, that if Donald, and we knew he would, he went and got an antitrust lawyer, which I think is very important, who's going to say, you can't step on my constitutional rights, even if you think we're signing it away. You really can't do that. And I have the right to pursue my livelihood the way I want to. And what I did does not amount to a crime. It doesn't amount to anything that should be warrant the fact that you can now step in and take away my livelihood, something I've worked for all of these years, no matter how much you may not like my behavior. And the other thing, too, is I thought it was very interesting the way he went after Magic Johnson in his interview. And I was talking to someone about this last night, and we were saying how stupid is that, because Magic Johnson is so beloved, and what he was saying was so incorrect factually. But the take that this person had on it was, well, he's kind of sending a message to all the other owners. Look, I've got information on all of you, and I'm going to bring it out if you guys vote against me. And what I keep saying is, where's that owner's vote? Everybody was so glad when Adam Silver stood up and said, okay, this is it, we're done, fine, and we're going to vote him out, and all the owners are going to step up and vote him out. It has been weeks. And the owners are still like, dragging their feet. They have not made that vote, which they could have done. And maybe there's problems there. Maybe there's concern. Maybe there's certain people who don't want to step up and vote against Donald Sterling because they're saying it's a slippery slope. I mean, Mark Cuban said that right at the beginning, although he seemed to get in line quickly after that. So I think it's going to be a long legal fight. I think he's going to fight the fine. I think he's going to fight, losing the ownership. And, they want to talk about, well, the players can then strike. Okay, the players can then strike. But it doesn't mean that Donald Sterling, who has billions of dollars, isn't going to fight this for years in the court, because having this team is what keeps him relevant.
Right.
It's what he wants to, do. This is where he wants to be out in the public and be able to feel his power. So he is not going to give this up without a major fight.
And what you're saying is very in line with what Carl Douglas said to us last week. He said that Donald Sterling will fight this tooth and nail, not only to stay relevant, but more importantly, to drive up the price of the team so that when he does sell, or if he does sell, or if he is forced to sell, he will sell at a high price to a David Geffen or Oprah or someone like that, rather than the low price right now, because people think, oh, it's a fire sale. I can, I can cheaply, try to acquire the Clippers because, it's a toxic situation right now. So it's very in line with what he said. Talking about Magic Johnson and the comments that were made, this is what I think about Donald Sterling. And I was talking to some friends about this week. I think that there is no doubt that he is a racist and that he has always been a racist. But I do believe that he does have dementia, and that his old age and his dementia, whatever it is, has made it so that he no longer has a filter. Whereas in the past, he may have at least had a filter. I think he truly, deeply, down to his heart, believes those terrible things that he has been saying. But I think that normally, or in years past, he may have had more of a filter. Because it was, when I watched that interview with Anderson Cooper, I was thinking, why is he even bringing up Magic Johnson right now? Why is he saying those things? And so I honestly think that he is lacking a filter that he once had. But, it doesn't justify what he said, but it somewhat explains his actions in my mind.
But there was an interesting moment there where he started to talk about Magic, then he stopped and he thought about it, and then he said, I may get in trouble for this, but he went ahead. Yeah. So I think he realizes, I think he realizes.
He just doesn't care.
I don't, but I agree. I think that it's so much the core of him, he does not understand how offensive it is to everybody else. And he is probably surprised. Hey, what? You're mad at me? But, because he has all along. And he's always been able to pay his way out of it in the past. He's always been able to fight it and pay his way out of it and never have to admit these things about himself and his character.
And I also think that Shelley Sterling doing her interviews this week and, talking about how excuse me, she plans to file for divorce, but, is waiting for the right time to do it. I think that is also a tactic, as Carl Douglas said, to try to drive up the price of the Clippers.
And I also think that they're two very much, I think they're working together. I really do. I think that they are, big partners through all of this. And you're absolutely right on the price, because when this first happened, everybody was saying, well, it's $575 million. And then all of a sudden, like a week later after this controversy, they're saying he's going to sell it for $1 billion or more. I mean, it already already, doubled in price. So it'll keep going up, I guess.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Lindsay Lohan.
The girl we always talk about.
Yes, little Lindsay Lohan. So I don't know how many of you watched the Oprah Winfrey series on her, but at the very
Not many
end,
people.
Yeah,
I sort of did. I couldn't help
didn't.
it. I couldn't help it. I love OWN.
but I do too. But at the very end, she did have this bombshell, and she wanted to explain some of her bad behavior away. And she said that she had experienced a miscarriage, and that was part of the reason why she had not been able to show up at some of the things. And now, and everybody was like, okay, is it true? If it's true, of course we have sympathy and we feel bad. But it seems to be pretty manipulative that this is where you announce it, Now, though, she has actually declared this under penalty of perjury and sworn documents in a lawsuit that she is involved in. It's a $5 million lawsuit over her clothing line, 6126, where she was saying that she had gotten a reprieve from the lawsuit, and she was saying she'd been in rehab, but then after she got out of rehab, she still didn't respond to the lawsuit, so judgment was entered against her. Now she's decided, too late, essentially, to fight that, and she's saying, well, it wasn't just because I was in rehab, it was also because I'd gone through this miscarriage, and I had all these other issues going on, and that's what I was trying to deal with. And obviously this this affidavit was filed under penalty of perjury. So, Mari, do you think that the fact that it was done now in a court document makes it any more legitimate? And, is there any way she can prove this?
You would think that she could be able to prove it with medical records if she had gone to the doctor, either, when she first got pregnant or when this miscarriage allegedly did occur. But I wouldn't be surprised if she then claims, oh, it was a miscarriage, but, it was so early, I hadn't gone to the doctor yet. And, it's just one excuse after the other with Lindsay Lohan, and I just stopped listening a long time ago.
Yeah, I'd be really concerned if it was not true, especially because I would hope that her attorneys, knowing her history, would further investigate any declarations that she had filed with the court to ensure that she didn't perjure herself or get them in any trouble as well. So.
Well, I mean, you would think, and usually they would attach, proof of what is in a declaration. If there were doctors, or even if she went to a psychologist or psychiatrist afterwards, talking about this issue, but apparently...
And Oprah doesn't count as a psychologist or psychiatrist.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see, and once again, now they could go after her for this if it ends up being, perjury. So she could have another little charge going
These
on.
people like Lindsay Lohan, like Chris Brown, like Justin Bieber, just constantly, have these legal suits one after the other. They keep their attorneys in business. Yeah. I mean... Lindsay Lohan. Hopefully we'll have Sean Chapman-Hawley on, her attorney, to discuss Lindsay Lohan. I would love to hear her opinions on.
Is she still her attorney? Because I know for a while there she went attorney searching.
Yeah.
I know. what day of the week is it? Right. I mean,
Right.
She should stick with Sean Chapman-Hawley because she is
Fantastic.
so good. Yeah.
I think our last story today revolves around View co-host Sherri Shepherd, and this is a pretty sad one actually. It was pretty sad to me, at least. Her husband, who TV writer Lamar Sally, who I think is affectionately referred to as Sal in the media, but and personally and by Sherri on her show, they just got married in 2011, and it was a pretty big wedding, and some of our View co-hosts were part of the wedding, and it was a wedding party, and it was a kind of a big TV moment, and he filed for divorce just very recently, broke the news. Not only is he requesting that, the only reason he filed legal separation instead of divorce is because he filed in California. In California, you have to be a resident.
And why did he file in California?
Community property, which takes us to our next point. He wants to have the prenuptial agreement invalidated. Apparently, the prenuptial agreement stated something to the effect of if their marriage lasted between 2 and 5 years, that Sal would get about $60,000.
But if that prenup is invalidated and he does become a legal resident in California, then he gets half of everything for the years that they were married, which is a lot more than what was in the prenup. So I find it very interesting that he decided all of a sudden, I'm just going to move to sunny California for the weather, for the celebrities.
Right. And he's
the money.
Exactly. He's alleging fraud. Not only that, he wants full custody of he and Sherri's unborn child. I think they announced, or it was reported that they were expecting a child via surrogate in July, and that, of course, took a lot of people by surprise. That move appeared to be like a warning shot. Like this is going to get ugly. What do you think? What do you think?
Well,
about
remember
that,
too,
Loni?
whoever has the child gets child support. And it's based on the income, of the parents. So it's going to be a hefty sum for that child support. And as cynical as this sounds, I think some parents do that. They say they'll take on the custody because they want that child support. Now, I don't know. I think there's also, these allegations that perhaps she's such a workaholic, she's not there, and, she already has a child, and maybe Sal feels like he's the one that's taking care of that child, so he should be the one taking care of the next child, and that he's the better caretaker too. So that, it may not be all, a cynical reason, but I think that is definitely something that goes to the heart of what Sherri has always said, and that is that she wanted to have this next child, that this is something that's very important to her. And it's interesting in her response, she just talked about the prenup and said, I want the prenup enforced, and she didn't say anything about the custody of the child. And apparently, I've read some of the allegations are that in the prenup, it does talk about, in the event that there's a child, that she would get full custody. So maybe she just figures, if I just stick to the prenup, make sure that's enforced, that's all going to be taken care of.
Well, I also think it was unfortunate that he used the filing of divorce papers to announce that this child is coming into the world. I think that she likely was going to wait until after the child was born or shortly before, and have it be like a joyous announcement of, I have a surrogate, she's given birth to my child, and it would be a celebration. And now it's announced amidst a divorce battle. I think that's very sad. And I just want to ask you both what you think the likelihood is of him being able to invalidate the prenup he's claiming on the basis of fraud.
We don't really know what that basis is. I mean, we don't really have any of the facts behind that. So I think it's pretty difficult to say at this point. I think when we saw that, it was like, whoa, fraud based on what?
Yeah.
Maybe she's the one who has some fraud issues, because apparently when she married him, and she discussed this many times on The View, she married Sal, who she believed to be a TV writer. He still is. I mean, he has some credits, but he isn't working and hasn't worked for some time, allegedly. And I think that, behind the scenes, news outlets have been reporting that she's kind of surprised by the direction his career has gone, and it's not necessarily what she thought it was, which I find a little bit doubtful, given that, it's very easy to Google people, and he's also in her same industry, so she could have figured out what his career was. But the fraud allegation, I think he's probably just using it as a legal tactic.
Well, I think it's going to come down to the prenup and how well it was written, and that's why you pay a lot of money to the attorneys who write those prenups and make sure that every thing is put in there to show that both sides knew exactly what they were getting when they signed that document, and that they were okay with it, they were properly advised, and that they were of sound mind, etc. And as long as it's a solid document and none of the little stipulations have been violated, then the courts really like to follow those and honor those contracts. So.
Well, it will definitely be a story that we will be watching. Please tweet us and let us know your thoughts about any of these stories. Chris Brown, Lindsay Lohan, Donald Sterling, Justin Bieber, take your pick. I'm sure you will have lots of opinions, as we do, on these topics. You can tweet me at Mari Fagel.
At Rahwa.
At Loni Coombs.
Rahwa, you keep it so simple. It's like Madonna. I just want it to be at Mari.
One name only. That's all we need.
And this is actually my last show for a while. I will be headed to the LA District Attorney's office next week. I'm very much looking forward to it. So thank you so much to our viewers and listeners for letting me take you on this journey on justice is served this last year. It has been wonderful. Thank you to my two wonderful co-hosts, and hopefully I will be back in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching, and have a good weekend. Do you hear music? Phil? Hello?